Hello, my name is Jenna, and I'm 32 years old. If there's one place in the world where I feel truly at peace, it's in my garden. Each flower, each tree, and each patch of grass is like a part of me. I've spent years nurturing it, watching it grow and change with each season. To me, my garden isn't just a place. It's a reflection of my hard work, my patience, and my love for nature. My husband, Daniel, and I live in a house that I thought would be our forever home. At least, that's what I hoped for when we first moved in together. I believed we would create memories here, grow old together, and, yes, enjoy the garden I've poured my heart into. But as I'm learning now, things aren't always as they seem. My mother-in-law, Linda, is a woman of strong opinions and even stronger demands. She believes that everything should go her way, no questions asked. For years, I tried to get along with her to keep peace in the family. But no matter how hard I tried, she seemed to find ways to criticize me or my choices. And my garden, it turns out, is her latest target. One morning, as I was trimming some roses, Linda marched over to me with a stern expression. "Jenna, I've been thinking," she began. "This garden takes up far too much space. I'm planning to turn this area into a private golf club for myself and my friends." I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. "A golf clubs?" I asked, almost laughing. "Linda, this is my garden. I've put so much time and effort into it. It means a lot to me," she scoffed, dismissing my words with a wave. "It's just a bunch of plants, Jenna. This golf club will be much more useful and prestigious. Besides, you know how much I love golf." I felt my heart sink. "Linda, I'm sorry, but I can't let you do that. This garden is important to me. It's not just plants. It's something I've built from the ground up." Her face hardened. "Is that so?" she said, her voice dripping with anger. "If you won't listen to reason, maybe you're not fit to be a part of this family. I'm warning you, Jenna. Either let us build this club, or you'll be dealing with a divorce." Her threat hit me like a slap. Divorce? Over a garden? I looked to Daniel for support, hoping he would understand and stand by me. But he just stood there, silent, avoiding my gaze. It was clear that he had chosen his mother's side. In that moment, I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. This wasn't just about my garden anymore. It was about everything I thought we had, everything I believed in. I wish I could say that Daniel came to his senses, that he realized how important the garden and my feelings were to me. But he didn't. That very evening, he approached me in the living room, a cold look in his eyes I had never seen before. "Jenna, maybe it's best if you just let this go," he said quietly, almost as if he didn't want to deal with the confrontation. "It's only a garden. My mom has always dreamed of a private golf club, and we have the space." I felt my stomach twist. "Daniel, you know what this garden means to me. It's not about the space or what she wants to do with it. It's about respect. I've worked hard to make this a beautiful place, something we can both enjoy." "I thought you understood that." He sighed, rubbing his temples like he was the one feeling burdened. "You're making this harder than it has to be. I don't want to be caught in the middle, Jenna. Mom's only asking for a small part of the yard, after all." "A small part?" I repeated, shocked at how easily he was dismissing my feelings. "She wants to rip out the entire garden, Daniel. Everything I've planted and cared for, gone in a day. And you're just going to let her?" He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. And in that silence, I felt something break inside me. I realized I was standing next to someone who was supposed to protect me, supposed to understand me, and yet, he was choosing his mother's dreams over mine. When I didn't back down, Linda's threats turned into action. The very next day, she brought in contractors and pointed to my garden as though it were already hers to tear apart. I ran outside, barely able to contain my anger. "What are you doing?" I yelled, rushing to stand between the contractors and my flowers. "You can't just bulldoze my garden." Linda crossed her arms, her face set with a smug smile. "Oh, I can do whatever I want. And if you keep resisting, I'll make sure Daniel gets rid of you for good." Daniel, standing off to the side, only muttered, "Maybe it's best if you go inside, Jenna." I looked at him, shocked, as he stood there, refusing to say a word to stop his mother. The betrayal felt like a cold knife through my heart. "You want me to leave?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't respond, just looked away again, like a coward hiding from the truth. Linda took advantage of his silence, reaching out to grab my arm and shove me away from the garden. "Get out," she hissed, practically spitting the words. "You're not welcome here anymore if you can't be part of this family." I stumbled back, my mind racing. I couldn't believe what was happening. With tears in my eyes, I turned toward the house, leaving the garden behind. And as I stepped through the door, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't giving up. They didn't know, but the house they stood in, the property they so casually tried to claim as their own, it was all in my name. I had inherited it from my grandmother before I even married Daniel. He had always assumed it was in his name, a minor detail he had never questioned. I walked out, heartbroken but determined. If they thought they could take everything from me, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I left that house feeling crushed, but as I walked down the familiar path away from my beloved garden, a surge of strength rose within me. They had turned me out, but they hadn't won. Not yet. I stayed with my father that night. Dad, a well-known lawyer, was always my rock, a steady presence in my life. When I explained everything that had happened, the threats, the betrayal, and how Daniel and his mother had tried to push me out of my own home, he listened patiently, his face growing more serious by the minute. "So they think they can just throw you out and take everything?" he asked, anger flashing in his eyes. "They have no idea who they're dealing with, do they?" I shook my head. "They don't. They never realized that the house is in my name." A slow smile crept onto his face. "Well then, Jenna, it's time to make sure they understand that they can't bully you. Let's settle this once and for all." The next morning, with Dad's guidance, I arranged to sell the house. It felt like a bittersweet goodbye, letting go of the home I had poured so much love into. But I knew that I was ready to move on. Letting go of the house wasn't a loss. It was a clean slate, a chance to start fresh without the shadows of betrayal looming over me. Within a few days, everything was finalized. Daniel and Linda had no idea that their so-called family home was slipping right out of their grasp. When the buyers arrived, the shock on Daniel and Linda's faces was priceless. I was nearby, watching from my car, as they were handed the news that the house was sold and they were expected to leave immediately. Linda went pale, and Daniel looked completely lost, his mouth hanging open as he processed the reality of the situation. They had gambled everything on the belief that they could control me, and they'd lost. I expected them to come searching for me, but I didn't expect them to arrive at my father's house later that evening, desperate and shaken. Dad and I were in the living room when we heard the knock. He opened the door to find them standing there, looking like they'd just lost everything, which, in a way, they had. "Jenna, please," Daniel began, his voice trembling. "I had no idea. Can we talk?" Linda, too, was uncharacteristically silent, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. They both seemed so small, so defeated, standing there in my father's doorway. Dad didn't waste any time. "You two have a lot of nerve showing up here after everything you've put my daughter through," he said, his voice calm but firm. "She doesn't owe you anything." I stepped forward, looking Daniel straight in the eyes. "You chose to stand by your mother over me, to support her when she tried to destroy the one thing that mattered to me. Now you're here, begging me to fix the mess you created? It's too late for that." Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but Linda cut in, her voice trembling. "We're sorry, Jenna. We were wrong. Please, just give us another chance." I took a deep breath, knowing that this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I'm done being pushed around, manipulated, and taken for granted. I gave you everything I had, Daniel, and you threw it all away for your mother's whims. I'm filing for divorce. Daniel's face fell, his eyes pleading, but I had made up my mind. There was no going back. With my father by my side, I began the process of freeing myself from a life that no longer held anything for me. Daniel and Linda were left homeless, having lost both the house and the comfort they'd once taken for granted. They had nothing left, while I was finally stepping into a life I could call my own. And as I walked away from that chapter, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was no longer the woman who would stand quietly by while others tried to control her. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to begin anew. As the days passed, I felt a renewed sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I didn't have to tiptoe around anyone or worry about keeping the peace. I could focus on rebuilding my life, one step at a time, without the weight of Linda's demands or Daniel's indifference holding me back. My father, ever supportive, encouraged me to take some time to figure out what I wanted next. I decided to move to a small, charming house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a large, overgrown yard that had the potential to be transformed into something beautiful. It wasn't my old garden, but it was a blank canvas, ready for new life to bloom. With each day, I poured my energy into clearing weeds, planting flowers, and creating a space that was entirely mine. The garden took shape little by little, each blossom a reminder of my strength and resilience. I knew it would take time, but watching the garden grow gave me a sense of purpose and peace. Then, one morning, as I was pruning a row of budding roses, a friendly voice interrupted my thoughts. "You've got quite a green thumb," a man said, smiling warmly. I looked up to see a tall, kind-looking man holding a small pot of lavender. "Thank you," I replied, wiping my hands on my gardening gloves. Gardening has always been a passion of mine. He introduced himself as Ethan, a neighbor who had noticed my work in the garden over the past few weeks. We chatted about plants, our favorite flowers, and the importance of finding peace in nature. There was something gentle and genuine about him, and I found myself enjoying his company. He didn't know anything about my past, and I didn't feel the need to explain. All that mattered was the present. Over time, Ethan became a regular visitor to my garden. We bonded over our shared love for nature, and he even brought over seeds and bulbs to add to my growing sanctuary. His kindness and support filled a space I hadn't realized was empty, and for the first time, I felt open to the idea of trusting someone again. As my garden bloomed, so did my sense of self. I took on new hobbies, joined local gardening clubs, and made friends who appreciated me for who I was. Slowly, I began to feel like the woman I had always wanted to be, strong, independent, and unafraid to take charge of her life. Meanwhile, Daniel and Linda's situation had grown more complicated. After being forced to leave my old house, they struggled to find stability. Without the financial support they had come to rely on, they ended up moving from place to place, each attempt to regain control of their lives proving more difficult than the last. They reached out to me a few times, hoping for a chance to reconcile, but I had made my choice. With every passing day, I knew that leaving them behind was the right decision. I had spent too long giving to people who didn't value me, but now I was finally putting myself first. The garden was proof of my growth, a living testament to the power of resilience. On a warm spring day, as I watched my garden in full bloom, Ethan joined me with 2 cups of tea. We sat in silence, watching the bees dart between flowers, and I felt a deep sense of contentment settle within me. "Thank you for everything, Ethan," I said quietly. "This garden, this life. I didn't think I'd get here." He smiled, placing his hand over mine. "You're stronger than you realize, Jenna. You've built something beautiful here, and it's just the beginning." Looking around, I knew he was right. I had found my peace, my purpose, and a new beginning. And this time it was all mine. Months passed, and life grew richer and more fulfilling than I had ever imagined. My days were filled with purpose, nurturing my garden, deepening friendships, and discovering new passions. With each new leaf that sprouted and every flower that bloomed, I felt the roots of my new life growing stronger. Ethan and I grew closer, but he respected my need for space and healing. He became a steady friend, someone who encouraged me to chase my dreams without holding me back. We'd spend afternoons chatting about everything from gardening to travel, and for the first time, I could envision a life where happiness wasn't tied to someone else's approval. One afternoon, while enjoying tea with my father, he brought up an idea that I hadn't considered. "Jenna," he said, looking at me thoughtfully, "have you ever thought about starting your own gardening business? You have a gift. Why not share it with others?" The idea surprised me, but it also sparked something inside. Gardening had always been my passion, and the thought of helping others create beautiful spaces filled me with excitement. "Do you really think I could do it?" I asked, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Of course you can," he replied, smiling. "You've already turned this garden into something magical. Imagine what you could do for others." With my father's encouragement, I spent the next few weeks researching, planning, and dreaming. Soon enough, my small gardening business, Bloom and Thrive, was born. I started by helping neighbors transform their yards, adding personal touches that made each garden unique and meaningful. The business quickly gained popularity, and before long, I was receiving calls from people all over town who wanted their gardens to be as vibrant and alive as mine. My work brought me immense joy, and with each project, I felt my confidence grow. I was no longer the quiet woman hiding behind her husband's wishes. I was Jenna, an independent businesswoman creating beauty from the earth. One evening, as I finished up a project for a local community center, I received an unexpected message. It was from Daniel. Despite everything, he had found a way to reach out to me, claiming he wanted to make things right. He explained that he and his mother were struggling, barely making ends meet, and that they wanted to start fresh. For a moment, old memories resurfaced, of the times I had believed in him, trusted him, and let him be my support. But those memories were clouded by the reality of his betrayal, of how he had chosen his mother's demands over my happiness. I knew that nothing he could say would change what had happened. I sat there, reading his message, feeling an unexpected sense of closure. I realized I no longer needed an apology or an explanation. I had already moved on, and my life was flourishing without him. I replied simply, "I wish you well, Daniel, but I've built a new life for myself. I'm at peace now, and I won't be going back." As I pressed send, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt a powerful sense of freedom, knowing I had finally let go of the last remnants of my past. Daniel's chapter in my life was over, and I was fully ready to embrace everything that lay ahead. That evening, as I stood in my garden, watching the moonlight filter through the flowers, Ethan joined me. He handed me a small potted plant, a delicate jasmine with tiny white blooms. "For your new beginning," he said softly. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me as I accepted his gift. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." He looked at me, his eyes kind and genuine. "You've come so far, Jenna. You've created a beautiful life." And as I stood there, surrounded by the garden I had poured my heart into, I realized he was right. I had found my peace, my strength, and a new path. My life was blooming, just like the flowers around me, and I knew that whatever the future held, I would face it with the resilience and courage that had brought me this far.